The Las Vegas Aces just exposed themselves in the most embarrassing way possible, and A'ja Wilson's dirty plays are only the beginning of this shocking story. What happened in that playoff game wasn't just basketball. It was a complete meltdown that revealed exactly who these so-called champions really are when things don't go their way. And before we dive into the chaos, if you're tired of seeing the refs let players get away with everything, hit that like button right now to show your support for fair play in the WNBA. This was supposed to be A'ja Wilson's night of glory. She had her MVP trophy in hand, the home crowd behind her, and everyone expected the Aces to steamroll the Indiana Fever. But what unfolded instead was one of the ugliest displays of desperation we've seen in playoff basketball. The moment things started going wrong for Vegas, they abandoned basketball completely and turned the game into a street fight. A'ja Wilson wasn't leading with skill. She was throwing elbows, shoving players after whistles, and flopping like she'd been hit by a truck when replays showed barely any contact. At one point, she literally hooked a player's arm on a rebound, then threw herself to the ground pretending to be fouled. This wasn't the MVP everyone talks about. This was someone completely losing control. But that wasn't the whole story, because while Vegas was busy playing dirty, something incredible was happening with the Indiana Fever. They came into this game missing 6 players due to injuries. Caitlin Clark couldn't play, Sophie Cunningham was out, and their roster was decimated. Everyone had written them off before the game even started. Vegas coach Becky Hammond had even gone on record saying Indiana hadn't seen the real Aces yet, basically dismissing them as a serious threat. That arrogance would come back to haunt them in the worst possible way. Because instead of folding under pressure, Indiana turned Vegas's dirty tactics into fuel. Every shove, every elbow, every cheap shot just made them play harder and smarter. What happened next would shock everyone watching because Kelsey Mitchell decided she'd had enough of the nonsense and took over the game completely. She dropped 34 points, a playoff career high, and every basket felt like revenge for the dirty plays Vegas kept throwing at them. The most satisfying moment came when A'ja Wilson committed a pathetic foul early in the game, trying to intimidate Mitchell and then missed her free throw. Ball don't lie, as they say. Mitchell kept attacking, kept scoring, and by the time the third quarter rolled around, you could see the panic setting in on the Vegas bench. They'd expected an easy win, a celebration of their dynasty, and instead they were getting embarrassed on their own court by a team everyone had counted out. The referees made everything worse by completely ignoring Vegas's dirty plays while calling phantom fouls on Indiana. There was one play where A'ja Wilson clearly shoved Lexi Hall to the ground. No call. Another where she set an illegal moving screen and pushed Hall again. No whistle. But when Kelsey Mitchell went up for a layup and A'ja Wilson showed her lip, they reviewed it and called a technical on Mitchell. The bias was so obvious that even the Vegas crowd could see it. At one point, they called a jump ball when Aaliyah Boston clearly had possession, and Vegas players were committing over-the-back fouls. The refs were trying their hardest to keep Vegas in the game, but Indiana refused to let it affect them. They just kept playing their game, kept pushing the pace, and kept exposing Vegas for what they really were, a team that couldn't handle adversity. Here's where things get really interesting because this loss means so much more than just one game. 72% of teams that win Game 1 in a best-of-5 series go on to win the whole thing. Vegas just handed Indiana massive leverage in a series everyone thought would be a sweep. The 2-time defending champions, playing at home with their MVP, lost to an injury-depleted team that wasn't even supposed to be competitive. And the way they lost, resorting to dirty plays, flopping, complaining to refs, showed their true character. When their basketball wasn't working, they tried to bully their way to victory. When that didn't work either, they just fell apart completely. The post-game reactions revealed everything about the mental state of both teams. Vegas players and coaches looked shell-shocked, making excuses about not playing with enough physicality or pursuit, completely avoiding the fact that they'd been outplayed from start to finish. Meanwhile, Indiana's locker room was electric. Players who'd been shoved, elbowed, and disrespected all game were celebrating not just a win, but proving everyone wrong. Lexi Hall, who'd been on the receiving end of most of A'ja Wilson's dirty plays, simply smiled when asked about it and said the team stayed focused on what they could control. That's the difference between champions and pretenders. Real champions don't need to play dirty when things get tough. But wait, it gets even more shocking when you look at how this fits into the bigger picture of what's happening in the WNBA right now. The league has been trying to clean up its image, attract more fans, and showcase the incredible talent these women have. Then you have games like this where the reigning MVP is throwing elbows and flopping instead of playing basketball. It's embarrassing for the league, and it's exactly the kind of thing that turns casual fans away. The contrast between how Indiana handled adversity with class and how Vegas melted down with dirty tactics couldn't be more stark. One team elevated the game, the other dragged it into the gutter. What makes this even more satisfying is remembering all the disrespect Indiana faced coming into this series. Media personalities were calling it a mismatch, saying Vegas would cruise to another title. The betting lines had Vegas as massive favorites. Nobody gave Indiana a chance, especially with all their injuries. But that's exactly what made their performance so special. They didn't just win, they dominated from start to finish. They controlled the pace, executed their game plan, and never let Vegas get comfortable. Even when the Aces tried to make it ugly, Indiana stayed composed and kept playing beautiful basketball. Odyssey Sims was incredible off the bench. Natasha Howard battled in the paint, and the entire team played with a chip on their shoulder that Vegas couldn't match. The technical details of how Indiana pulled this off are fascinating too. They attacked Vegas's defense with constant movement, never letting them set up their half-court defense. They pushed the pace after every rebound, turning Vegas's missed shots into transition opportunities. And most importantly, they didn't back down from the physical play. When Jackie Young threw her weight around on screens that looked more like football blocks, Indiana players absorbed the contact and kept moving. When A'ja Wilson tried her intimidation tactics, they just smiled and got back on defense. This wasn't just physical toughness, it was mental superiority. They knew Vegas was rattled, and they kept applying pressure until the Aces completely broke down. Now, here's what nobody's talking about, but everyone should be. This loss could destroy Vegas's entire season. They've shown every team in the league that they can be beaten, that they'll resort to dirty plays when frustrated, and that their home court advantage means nothing if you come ready to fight. Other teams are watching this film right now, seeing how Indiana exposed them and taking notes. The blueprint is out there. Push the pace, don't back down from physical play, and watch Vegas self-destruct when things don't go their way. The dynasty everyone thought was untouchable just showed it's built on sand, ready to crumble at the first sign of real resistance. The individual performances tell an even more damning story about Vegas's collapse. A'ja Wilson, the newly crowned MVP, looked more like a rookie having a tantrum than a league leader. She finished with decent numbers on the stat sheet, but anyone watching could see she was more focused on trying to intimidate opponents than actually playing basketball. Meanwhile, players like Kelsey Mitchell and Odyssey Sims were showing what real playoff basketball looks like: controlled aggression, smart shot selection, and leadership when it matters most. The contrast was embarrassing for someone who's supposed to be the face of the league. What's really wild is how this game exposed the entire Vegas system as fraudulent. They've been winning with talent and intimidation, but when faced with a team that wouldn't be bullied, they had no answer. Their coach looked lost on the sidelines. Their star players were arguing with refs instead of focusing on the game, and their role players disappeared completely. This wasn't just one bad night. This was a complete organizational failure that revealed deep problems with how this team is built and coached. They've been getting away with this style of play because of their talent advantage, but Indiana just proved that heart, hustle, and smart basketball beats dirty tactics every time. The aftermath of this game is still developing, but the implications are massive. Vegas has to go home and figure out how to respond without looking even more desperate. Do they double down on the physical play and risk more embarrassment? Do they try to play clean basketball and admit they were wrong? Either way, they're in trouble because Indiana has all the momentum and confidence now. The Fever players are walking taller, talking louder, and playing with the swagger of a team that knows they can win this series. They've already done the hardest thing, winning on the road against a desperate team with the refs against them. Looking ahead to the rest of this series, Vegas is in serious trouble. They can't rely on their home crowd anymore because Indiana just silenced them. They can't count on intimidation because Indiana laughed it off. And they definitely can't count on the refs to bail them out forever because even biased officiating couldn't save them in Game 1. What they need is to completely change their approach. But that's easier said than done when your best player is more interested in throwing elbows than making plays. The pressure is entirely on Vegas now, and based on how they handled it in Game 1, that's the worst possible situation for them. This game will be remembered as a turning point in WNBA playoff history, not because of the score or the stats, but because of what it revealed about both teams' character. Indiana showed their warriors who won't back down from anyone. Vegas showed their frontrunners who fall apart when challenged. That's the kind of difference that decides championships. And right now, the team everyone counted out looks like the one with championship DNA. If you think the refs need to start calling these dirty plays and protecting players who actually play basketball the right way, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're going to be covering every game of this series and exposing every dirty play that happens. The WNBA deserves better than what Vegas showed in Game 1. And Indiana just proved that playing the right way can still win in this league.